Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And the topic for our panel is boosting investment. And boosting investment is almost a surrogate for boosting economic activity. And the second boundary condition is to keep it simple. I'm not going into the stupid part, but make it simple. And really, if we can combine these two things, there's nothing remaining to be done if you can boost economic activity in few simple steps. But we will attempt to do that, and who better than the gentleman, the Honorable Minister on my left, who is in charge of, who's going to steer India's energy concerns for the next 5 years, I expect, combining two portfolios of coal and power. And if there are two policies which are resembling a spaghetti, it is these two sectors. And how to untangle and how to make it simple. If Mr. Goyal can succeed in his task, it will make an enormous difference to our country, and we all wish him well. Maybe I can invite him to share his preliminary thoughts on the subject, and then we will get into the other panelists.
Am I okay from here, or you want me to go?
You're okay from here.
Thank you, Sanjeev. A very eminent panel. Thank you, ET Now. A lot of good friends in the distinguished audience. Well, it's not all about the economy. It's about the people of India also. And I suspect both things are no contradictory to each other at all. End of the day, we have 1 billion plus people. You can't get a better market, a bigger market, a more aspirational market anywhere in the world. And if we can set the framework right, I see no reason why any investor, any business has to lose money in India. I believe the last few years was not about things going wrong or individual actions. Madam just mentioned about GAR. She talked about the tax laws. There was some talk about ease of doing business. I personally feel it's more about vision and more about leadership. In my personal opinion, what was lacking was the ability to think big, the ability to plan to scale, the ability to visualize what are the pain points that the economy is going through, and the lack of ability of connecting the people's aspirations with your actions. I mean, end of the day, even GAR, for that matter, is something which prevails all over the country, prevails all over the world. It's not something that was unique to India. The fear was how it would be implemented in India. The fear of tax terrorism, which was prevalent quite starkly in different parts of the country with different agencies in a hyperactive mode. Or the fact that there was policy flip-flop over the last few years, which left investors completely clueless to the next steps forward. So in my opinion, what we needed most, and which is what Prime Minister Modi brings to India, is the ability to think big, to visualize a bright future for the country, plan that at every stage, at every level, in every area that affects people's lives, and the ability to execute these plans. It's not that we are going to do anything significantly new. All of these are things which we talked about while we were in opposition. All of these things are programs which have happened in different parts of the country. A lot of the things will be such that we will pick up from one state or the other, from some part of the world or the other. There could be a few ideas which may be unique to India, given our demographic dividend, given the fact that we have a large number of young people, a big middle class, the new middle class, the aspirations and expectations of the youth, the jobless growth that we have to tackle. There are some unique problems to India where we will have tailor-made solutions. But clearly what is required is the ability to work with integrity and honesty, What is required is sincerity of purpose, where all of us have to not only demonstrate by words, but by action. We mean business, we mean to conduct ourselves honorably, we mean to provide a framework which is stable. We have to work for the welfare of the people. Every action has to, end of the day, result in something which translates to benefit for the larger masses in the country. And if we keep our sights on the goal right, I see no reason why businesses cannot flourish. I used to mention on various occasions in the past that in my own sector, the energy sector, the demand, the latent demand is so huge that you just can't go wrong. I can't visualize how a sector such as energy could ever lose money in India. It's completely ridiculous to imagine a nation where parts of the country is consuming 145 units per annum per capita. You have large parts of eastern India where most of the natural resources are placed or located. Not even getting half a unit a day per person. At the aggregate, we don't consume even 1,000 units per year. When you compare that even with China at 4,000, with the West, several countries at 7,000-8,000, you feel very small. But it also shows you the tremendous opportunity ahead of us. And in that sense, energy is one sector I can visualize right before my eyes, where the trillion units that we produce today should become 2 trillion in the next 4.5 years, should become 4 or 5 trillion in the next 5 years. And I hope, Sanjeev, you're proven wrong. We get more than 5 years to be able to set our agenda for the people. But my view is that the country is yearning for more. There's tremendous consumption, both in industry, households, the farming consumption, businesses in the services sector, financial services, IT. The potential demand is huge. What we need to create is stable policy framework, a regulatory mechanism which people can trust, a situation where the sale of energy is bankable, power purchase agreements are bankable, so that investors can come into the sector, and the confidence in investors that their money is safe, their money will not be put to harassment by tax officials, by regulators, by policy makers. And the first 6 months have largely gone in trying to understand what has gone wrong with the sector, in taking the low-hanging fruits, addressing the immediate concerns of the industry, sorting out the aftermath of the coal mines deallocation or cancellation, which to me was not a crisis but more like an opportunity. Understanding what are the successful experiments in different states, whether to manage their subsidy regime well, whether to manage their discoms well, whether to bring down transmission distribution losses, power theft. And from all of the learnings of the last 6 months, I believe we have today a framework which will set a lot of these uncertainties right. The coal industry, to my mind, is on track. The Coal India will perform better, will go up to 1 billion tons in the next 5 years. You have already seen the traction against a 1.5% growth last year. Coal production in the first 7 months of this year is up nearly by 8.5%. In fact, if you take the period after Mr. Modi got sworn in, it's up by upwards of 10%. Electricity generation since June has been up nearly 11.5%. Even from the April to October period, it's up 10.5%, as against only 5% in the corresponding period last year. And in a situation where hydel power was badly affected from June to August. And despite that fall in hydel electricity production, the country didn't face any stress because during those 3 critical months, June to August, we were able to push the stocks into the power plants, generate nearly 20% more out of coal-based thermal plants, and ensure that nowhere in India people had to face blackouts or load shedding. In fact, just as I was leaving, I was reading an article and I carried it along. Power cuts ahead as 53 plants stressed due to fuel shortage. I think this kind of sensationalism and cynicism, very often that we see in the country, is something where people, and particularly my focus is on the media, who I believe have the ability to discern what's happening, would be far better served, the nation's interests would be far better served if they went into the detail of the situation. If at all there is a coal shortage in the plants, it's not because that the coal production has come down. It's because the generation of electricity has been twice what the additional production of coal is. And we still have a huge mismatch. The last 5 years have seen generating capacity increase by 73%, as against coal production going up by barely 7%. So in that situation that the government came into, the efforts that are being made and the focused efforts, we have every aspect of the coal sector mapped out to see how Coal India will double its production in the next 4.5, 5 years, how the private sector will be able to get the mines through e-auction, through a completely transparent and honest mechanism, so that there can be no possibility of a stranded coal-based power plant within the next 2.5 years. Hopefully all this production capacity comes into being. The gas plants are being addressed separately to see what we can do to provide some fuel to use their ability to act as a spinning reserve, something which has not been recognized for years in this country. The ability of gas plants to ensure that a 2012 type of blackout doesn't occur. The power of investment in transmission and distribution to make sure no parts of India are wanting for power, while Chhattisgarh and Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh have surplus power. The 360-degree solution is what this government is looking at, a more holistic picture to address the woes of this sector. Investors have had a tough time in the last few years. After the introduction of the new Electricity Act, the Electricity Act of 2003 is being amended to bring in much more robust regulatory framework to strengthen the renewable energy story, to meet the aspirations of India to address climate change, and to bring about a more stable tax regime or tariff regime in the country. With these efforts and the effort to ensure that adequate fuel is supplied, the transmission and distribution network is strengthened, I believe the India story is set to take off in the energy sector at least. We are also strengthening the Make in India program for power equipment, for renewable energy equipment. We are simultaneously seeing how we can dovetail the Jan Dhan Yojana to reach out to the last man with electricity connections and connect him with technology. We're looking at smart metering, smart grids, so that technology becomes the enabler to put an end to power theft, to put an end to coal theft. A lot of initiatives, many of which I've spoken about ad nauseum, are underway. I'm quite confident investors, some of whom may have had some stress times in the past, will see better times in the years ahead. Thank you.
Minister, we heard the Finance Minister and the Commerce Minister and the Railway Minister earlier in the day. You have given a very, very good summary, which I think cuts across all aspects of the functioning of the government, not just the energy sector. And if I were to call out, what you're fundamentally saying is that we don't have to be an economic or a technical genius. Sincerity of purpose, application of mind and focus and teamwork is probably what is needed. And you gave a very good example that in an energy-starved country, it is unimaginable, except for stupidity, why a business in the energy sector should fail. I have, if I may just step into Gujarat, when it was under the chief ministership of our present Prime Minister, and I haven't heard it personally, but one of the folklores is that it was the belief of the then Chief Minister, maybe 8-10 years ago, that investments were not happening. One of the principal reasons was corruption. Not the only reason, but one of the principal reasons. And it is attributed that he analyzed, to take a metaphor from macroeconomics, into supply-side corruption and demand-side. Demand-side when someone is demanding something which he should not be demanding, and supply-side when business tries to bend the rules when they should not be bending the rules. In any case, I think with considerable success, he was able to mitigate, if not eliminate, some of these things. And the impact of some of these obstructions is not just that investment does not happen, as we find in many of the energy sectors, but even when it happens, it attracts, with few honorable exceptions, investments from a particular type of catchment pool. Now, if we were to get out of that catchment pool, we will not only get money, but we will also get technology, we will get meritocracy, and we will get competition. Would you be able to sketch very briefly how it might look like either in the country in general or in your two sectors of the energy, or how you can help us, help our country get out of this?
Well, I'll just tell you by my own personal examples, but on the big picture, if you see, we've closed 6 months of this government. Not one allegation of corruption in the entire government of India has come to fore or has been a matter of public debate. This government has worked in a most transparent manner. All our actions are by and large with consensus, with the involvement of all stakeholders. And in the first 6 months, not a single issue where we could be hauled up or pulled up for any indiscretion has come to light. But I'll give you one or two of my personal examples where I found where I found myself very happy about the ability of sincerity to make a difference. When I was finalizing the coal rules, the auction rules, I found that there were always somewhere or the other there was a flexibility which would have allowed me to use discretion. So 2 Sundays back, we are on Saturday now, about 13 days back, we sat down in the coal ministry at 3:30 in the afternoon. And we spent 4-5 hours running through the rules with a tooth comb and making sure that there should be absolutely no discretion in the whole process, that even I could exercise if I wished to. And we have made the rules so transparent. And all of this have been put out in public domain. We have solicited support from the people of India and all stakeholders in terms of suggestions. And I'm delighted that the coal ordinance, to date, it came out, it was approved by Cabinet on 20th October. And you'll bear me out, the Supreme Court passed its orders on 24th September. In less than 3 weeks, we had an ordinance which, in effect, was sorting out 40 years of problems in less than 40 days. And at the end of the day, from 20th October till now, in the next 46 days, I have not heard one criticism on any of the clauses of the whole ordinance, except if at all some of the pink papers alleging that we didn't open it up fully or we didn't wind up Coal India, which never was intended to be. We believe Coal India has a very important role to play. We believe Coal India has a very bright future. And my personal vision is to make Coal India the world's most valuable mineral company in 5 years. Having said that, if we do our homework right and we sort out the glitches at the initial stage, I'm very confident the rules can be framed, the laws can be made in such a manner that discretion goes out of the window. Everything is rule-driven, everything is process-driven. And towards that end, in the last 6 months, I have not signed a single file which related to an individual case. Whenever a case is flagged off to me, and I'm sure you'll appreciate, with the kind of mess that I inherited, there must be hundreds of petitions that come to my office. It's almost on a daily basis that people had been approaching initially with problems. But every problem was taken to its root cause. We analyzed where the problem originated, what was that function of the law or of the rules or of the regulation which was causing that pain, and we addressed it at the root. So our focus has only been policy making, not sorting out individual cases. And I think that's given us excellent results. The trickle down is so stark, I hardly get any individual cases to sort out.
Thank you. I think we've got a very good flavor, and this is most encouraging. I understand that in 2 or 3 minutes it's not possible to answer all A to Z of that question, but it's a very good sense, fundamentally, of trying to eliminate discretion. And if discretion at all has to be used, one should have the confidence it is used in the best interest of the country.
What I said is, if at all any officer is using discretion, he makes it a speaking order. Absolutely. And we put it in the public domain on the website.
I have a question for you, and please feel free to interrupt any moment. I have a question to you, but I'd reserve that towards the end of the session. How our bureaucracy, which 30, 40, 50 years ago among developing countries was the unique strength of India, our institutions and democracy. Today, many people put it harshly that the bureaucracy has no stake in the outcomes. It is obviously an exaggeration, but it nevertheless points, and I would like to understand from you how we can re-engage and get them back to what they should be. Obviously, the people are the same. It's only the output which has changed. But let me just turn to Adil, who brings not just his McKinsey hat from India, from the United States, any parts of the world, but now also the Quality Council. And I want you to specifically, if you can, there are a couple of phrases, expressions used for India, once again to dramatize a situation that we have heavy inspector Raj, but negligible or erratic enforcement Raj. And after certain court decisions, capitalism in crime and socialism in punishment. But how can we take, I don't want to box you, but how can we take a slightly technocratic, simple approach to lick some of these problems?
So, of course, you're trying to change everything, and it's impossible to do that in 2 minutes. Maybe 4 I could do it, but in 2 minutes it's impossible to solve all problems.
Take 3.
So, I just wanted to talk about one part, which is, today we have the ability to use technology to simplify many things. So, for example, we just heard in the earlier session that if you're a small business of 10 people, just the labor laws, the registration for labor laws, if you fulfill everything that's required, requires you to file an 84 pages of registrations every year. And you are subject to inspectors, labor inspectors coming. Remember, this is a 10-person or 11-person shop, right? Coming and visiting you at any time at the discretion of the individual inspector. Okay. So that's the current situation. And I think what can change in this, and which I think the Labour Secretary was talking about the change as an example, is you could simplify all of that and get down to a simple 3-page form that is available on the web. So you never have to go anywhere. You fill it on the web. You don't have to, you don't have to fill it in paper. You don't have to go submit it. That the inspector does not have the discretion to come visit you. That when you have 750,000 such enterprises that are registered, and actually, let's say 7.5 million enterprises that are registered, you can use analytics to spot where you might want to inspect, because there's, you have that much data. And so now there are rules-based and analytics-based mechanisms that the supervisor can decide who to go inspect. And then the inspector who goes there has to file a report in 72 hours and put it on the website, so that you know what came out. And if it doesn't come in 72 hours, then it is deemed, then that inspection is invalid. So nothing happens, right? So if you take that as an example and you say, we could take all permissions and all forms, put it on the web using technology through a portal, which is actually not very difficult to do. You would actually do it. I'm sure many of our Indian companies could automate that very quickly. And you track the statistics about whether or not that is being implemented, then all of a sudden you have a sea change and you don't have to wait for the mind shift change in an individual bureaucrat, right? Because to your point, you're taking the discretion out of it, you're making it simple, you're not letting an inspector figure out for himself or herself who to go visit. And, that's where a lot of this comes. So I think maybe 10 years ago we couldn't have done it and you'd need a mind shift change amongst all people. But today, with using technology, a lot of this can be simplified. And I think one of the things that one can do is put a little bit of competition between states. So, yesterday, the Maharashtra Chief Minister, or I think earlier this week, announced that for companies with less than 50 people, they're going to shrink the number of permissions required from some 27 to 3. And that in 3 days, once you apply, if you don't get the permission, it's deemed given. They have to say yes or no, right? And so I think using that, if we do that, we could get from 184, I think you said, to maybe 50. And actually, it can be done quite quickly if we wanted to do it. And so if one state does it and it works, I'm sure the other states will start looking at it and saying, why can't we do this, right? My personal idea was give the whole thing to Naukri.com or any one of our startups and say, listen, you guys do it. You'll implement it in 30 days rather than even let the government do it, right? Because we have such smart people who can figure this out quickly, and if they can make a little, get a valuation of $10 billion or something out of it, they will be happy to do it very quickly. So I think it's possible today to do it, which was not possible before. Whether we will do it or not, we'll see. But it is possible. The technology is available. The Prime Minister's view on more governance, less government, the view of several chief ministers that we have to simplify has gotten to the point where it's outrageous, I think gives us some hope that something good will happen in this front. And that's for small businesses, right? You can then start applying the same thing to businesses of 50 to 1,000 or businesses of 1,000 plus. And all of a sudden, I'm looking forward to the day when this system is in place so that the number of people who travel from Bombay to Delhi to come and see you, Minister, I know you'd love to see all of us, but actually goes down and the airlines start cutting back on flights from Bombay to Delhi because there's no need to come, right? You just enter everything. I don't think that's quite the case now, right? Flights are increasing.
May I give an analogy to that, if you don't mind? Simple thing. 3 years ago, I did it, and right now, my daughter's doing it. First, it was my son. The common application form for admissions to US universities. Because that data is common for most labor inspectors. Though 26 or as many 84 permissions, 80% data is the same. You just need a small supplement for each particular activity. And that way, look at the colossal saving in paper and the environment protection. So what you're saying is absolutely doable, and we shall do it.
I think Marten is smiling because he's hoping that you do it on your mobile phone.
No.
That's doable for sure.
That's doable, isn't it? That's right. That's
One
right.
sec, I have got a more difficult question for Marten. Don't
Please,
give him these
go ahead.
questions. But next coming to you, I'm just skipping shift for a minute. I think what you're basically saying, Adil, is a country of the size of India, you cannot be taking millions of boutique decisions. As far as possible, convert it into an industrial process, improve quality, reduce errors, simplify, and make it also customer friendly. Just cut through all this maze, and
But industrial process is an old word. Web process.
Web process. Now, the reason I deliberately used industrial process is, and that comes to my question to Marten for a minute, because not everything doesn't have to be on the web. When you have insufficient bandwidth and when you have low, so you have to start with a mechanical manual process, and it has to also coexist on the web. I just want to be cynical, just for a minute, just for a joke. Anytime, there are already government processes which require the 30 days, otherwise it's deemed done. But on 30th day, you'll get a query.
Yes.
So the process starts again. So please make sure. But I think it can be done. Another thing we need to be careful, as Mr. Narayan Murthy was mentioning in the morning, is that we've got so much brain power in India who have done these kinds of things for other countries. but no Indian company has ever made money. They've always lost money in a government project. So we need to just make sure that those rules of engagement ensure at least a moderate return, if not a... So these are small things, they are very doable, it requires someone to evangelize, will to do, sincerity. But I just want to come to a lot of these things of this government, of which Mr. Piyush Goyal is spearheading a big drive, depend on bandwidth or depend on spectrum. Not just by mobile, but various other... but you have had, Marten, you've worked in many, many countries in telecommunications. Would you be able to pinpoint where India seems to be, or just your remarks? What is it that we have missed out? Why are we missing? We've done very well, but then we keep having self-goals now and then.
Yeah, I think, look back, then the telecoms industry, the mobile telecoms industry, mainly started here, let's say around 1995, and it took very slowly. It took very slowly off, and it had a crisis in 1999, as you know, and the thing was reset, and from that moment on, it went actually very well, until we got the 6 new licenses that came 6 years ago, and then the thing started to go down again. If you look at spectrum, which is the raw material for broadband, meaning that if in the last policy that the last government made, the telecom policy, saying in 2020 we should have 600 million broadband connections. Today we have about 60 maybe. How do you get there? You can only get there if you create the highway that all this data has to travel on, which is called spectrum. Now, if you take the world's average spectrum that is available for commercial use, because spectrum is, of course, also used by armies and for aviation and so on, then India has only made about half available for commercial use than other countries have. That's for various reasons, but that means that it already limits the supply. And then the other thing, that the outcome of 10-year telecom policy is that actually we have at least twice as much telecom players as other countries have. So that means that it's a very simple calculation, and if you do it, then you see it. If you take Bharti in Delhi, or you take Vodafone in Mumbai, which are the biggest operators in both cities, we have about 25% of the spectrum that a comparable operator would have in Singapore or London, or I'm not even talking about China, because China is actually, they have a lot more. So that is the crunch that's happening in the raw material. If you say, why has that happened? I think sometimes there is this kind of nearly funny optimism in India that we beat the laws of gravity. Because if you really study this industry, then you see everywhere in the world, and it's not rocket science, that there are about 3, 4, 5 max telecom operators, and typically number 3, 4, 5 are already financially struggling. Typically, actually, number 5 is about to go broke, but you know, he carries on. Number 4 will never make money, and if you get lucky and you have enough market share, number 1 is typically very profitable, number 2 is profitable, but that is the structure absolutely everywhere. And why is that? That is because it's a huge fixed investment that goes in, and it doesn't matter if you have a few customers or a lot of customers, everyone wants to talk everywhere, meaning you have the same network cost, you have the same marketing cost, etc. Now, for whatever reason, we thought in India, apparently, that here 10 or 11 operators can survive, which doesn't happen. So the industry structure is wrong. You need to rectify the industry structure. And to me, and I've had, of course, many discussions with the DOT or government representatives, I think the government has taken too much, in my view, of a backseat there. Like, this is a competitive issue, it's not an issue for us. But it's not true. I think the government is not responsible for our profits, but it is responsible for the industry structure, because it is a heavily regulated industry. And the outcome is not good. It is actually not about us, the companies, it's really about India Inc. And so if the digital India agenda and the smart cities that the government is talking about, and where we're all very, of course, supportive, if that needs to happen, then you will have to fix this problem one way or the other.
Just a minute. I think it's a little unfair to say that if we have boarded the train, we're not going to, or the government should not allow others to board the train. Marten, it may be possible that a bigger player, maybe an AT&T, comes to India and sets up a bigger operation. Maybe 2 of the existing players become unviable and he survives. So I would beg to disagree that it's government's job to restrict the competition and take care or protect the interests of existing players?
I'm not saying restrict the competition. I think the handing out of 6 new licenses, which happened some years ago, was a very, in a way, in my view, not very well thought through act, because you could see that this would have an effect that was not good overall. Of course, competition is good, but hyper-competition is counterproductive in this industry. It might not be everywhere, but that's why I'm saying there's a lot of proof of that. Because what you create is an industry that's no longer financially strong enough to make the investments that are necessary. If I take the example of China, China invests every year $50 billion in its telecoms infrastructure with 3 players who are all profitable, very profitable actually. We invest in India about 5. And that is the outcome of the process, meaning that the industry structure is not right.
If I may just wear a different hat, I think there should always be scope for a new entrant, always. There should never be a clamp. However, if the entry of a dozen or half a dozen new entrants is premised on subsequent trading of an administered raw material, that is what has landed the last government in a serious problem. And the process. So I think your point is absolutely right, and I don't think it should remain always full-blooded competition. But if I may quickly, because we are a little short of time, Shiv, if I may ask you, you worked for 2 multinationals. You're working for Pepsi. You've had a very successful career with Nokia. I don't know which hat you'd like to wear. But how would you, since you have this perspective, how would you rate foreign investment? We were talking of all kinds of investment, Indian, foreign, small, big, but foreign investment into India, and what can be done, in your opinion, a few simple things to push us up?
Yeah. I would say if I look at foreign direct investment, if I step back first, I think India will follow a very unique model. And I think we repeatedly make the mistake of comparing ourselves with country X, country Y, country Z, and drawing all kinds of charts. My experience over 20 years says that it's completely wrong. I failed miserably every time I've done those parallels. India has its own problems, its own unique solutions, and it has to approach it that way. Let's look at FDI, simple facts at a global level. The total FDI in the world is $610 billion. About 12,000 projects creates 1.5 million direct jobs. Okay, that's where it is. Now, which is the source of FDI? America. Which is the destination of FDI? China. China got 64 billion last year. We got 15. We cannot afford to work on 50. We have to start thinking 50. Okay? So if we have to start thinking 50, what are the simple rules that investors follow? And Pepsico is a very big investor in India. We announced 5.5 billion last year. The top projects which people put money behind and why? Size of domestic market. 840 projects is behind that. Okay, India is a large domestic market, but I have one caveat. We should not be arrogant about it. Okay, if you're large, it beholds you to be humble and not arrogant. Number one. Second is market proximity. It would apply for a Mexico or somebody. For us, I don't think so. Next is regulatory stroke business climate. I think we have a lot to do there, and I have some thoughts there. Next is skilled workforce. I think we are woefully short in that area. 4th item. And the 5th item is infrastructure. Again, we can do a lot better. So I have some simple 4 or 5 thoughts on this. First is all investment in this country, we've looked at it as big versus small. I think we need to have the paradigm to say big and small coexisting in an ecosystem, not big versus small. Okay, because today we have to start thinking scale. Because the size of the Indian market argues that we need to think scale. We cannot be thinking small. Small must work with big, and that ecosystem will benefit the country. So anything we can do to simplify that, I think will be a great enabler. Second, skilled workforce. Today we have just 7 years of school education. We have to put emphasis to bring it up to 10. Otherwise, for the next 20 years, we'll be arguing this point time and again. Third, ITI. If you look at the industrial technical institutes, the whole curriculum is analog. We have to shift it to digital. If we are talking smart cities, we are talking technology, we have to really make the program of ITIs, which are the people who create apprentices, into a digital program. Next is, much has been said. We need an attractive policy, we need a consistent policy. But the defining word here is trust. There is a lack of trust in our policy. We have to ensure that both for internal investment as far as external investment, we have to create a climate of trust. Okay, that's a very subjective thing. It is not a thing of, objective numbers, etc. People have to believe that, yes, India is a place that I want to invest, and I want to win, and it gives me a fair chance. That's the next one. That I don't have, more than that. And next I would say is, encourage industry to be self-regulated. Why don't we change the paradigm to say, self-regulate yourselves? Why do we need to regulate them? Okay, use technology for governance and transparency. Use self-regulation as a mechanism to say, here, you don't meet that, then here's the issue. Okay, and finally, I believe the big one which will unlock scale thinking is GST. The earlier we do GST, I think the size of the godowns, tomorrow people can actually air freight their goods instead of using train and lorries in a future world. Okay, you need one big godown maybe in Bangalore to serve anything which is 400 kilometers away. I think the scale we'll get in supply chain, the scale we'll get in factories, and hence the consumer market will undergo dramatic transformation if you do GST quickly. So those are my simple but humble submissions on what we can do.
They're very good, not simple, very incisive. But Krish, let me turn to you. I mean, you can speak on behalf of Walmart, or you can speak in general as an Indian. But one of the things that strikes some of us is that a lot of our policies in the past were half-baked, lacked conviction. So you're not sure whether you're pregnant or not pregnant, whether you will allow it in the center but not allow it in the state, and so on. And say yes, but then put 10 caveats. So that seems to be either a crisis of leadership or communication, or perhaps just conviction. What is your experience, or would you like to throw light on this, or anything else you have in mind?
So what I decided before I came here today is that I will not talk on behalf of Walmart, or will not talk on foreign direct investment in retail. Because I think there is a more important issue, which is about the commitment that needs to be made to the retail industry in India. So if you look at statistics, manufacturing, 16% of GDP, 14% of employment. Agriculture, 14% of GDP, 60% of employment. But the the major enabler for both is retail and logistics and supply chain. So we know that the logistics and supply chain is weak in India, and which has its impact on retail. And if you don't have robust supply side opportunities available, we are unable to drive the domestic consumption the way we should be able to drive. China's story of manufacturing has been generally based on exports. India's story is all about domestic consumption and private consumption. That's our opportunity. And if we really want to drive this domestic consumption, we must first strengthen the supply side of the products so that the demand will take off. So the first point which I want to make is that can we not consider giving retail an industry status, which means that warehouses, distribution centers can then be set up on industrial land, and with electricity costs at industrial rates, land at industrial rates of rents, the whole industry will become much more viable, and the domestic players, domestic investors, as well as some of the foreign investors who want to invest in the infrastructure in supply chain will find it much more viable to do so. The second point is that I think, Shiv, you made all the points regarding any investor for that matter, domestic or foreign, and very valid points. So political risk or political stability and the policy risk. India is doing very well on political stability, and foreign retailers or Indian investors don't see that risk. When it comes to the policy risk, India is doing better than China and Russia among the BRICS countries, but it is not doing as well as, say, Brazil or South Africa. What I mean specifically, for instance, is the regulatory predictability. And when you take as an example the e-commerce space, the B2C e-commerce. Now, marketplace in B2C e-commerce, is it 100% legal? Some players are doing it. Are there question marks? Will some of these players get into big trouble when the business really becomes very big? Because that's been the history generally, that we don't have a concept of advanced ruling, nipping it in the bud, coming out with a policy statement very clearly that marketplace is fine or marketplace is not fine. I think that kind of regulatory clarity at the initial stage can go a long way in either bringing in investments or at least stopping investments at a certain stage where there's no future pain. And the third point, and the final one which I want to make, is on ease of doing business. We're talking about having actually slipped in the ranking on ease of doing business as far as the latest report is concerned. But if you dig deeper, there are only two areas which we need to address, and that can improve our ranking quite significantly. On licensing and permits for the construction industry, our ranking is 184 out of 189. That speaks volumes for the issues that we face as far as construction licensing permits are concerned. We want to open our, say, cash and carry stores, which actually promotes kirana shops and office institution business, etc. But it just takes more than a year to get the permits in place, and it takes another 1 year then to do the rest of the stuff.
Have you worked in Gujarat?
I have not worked in Gujarat, but I worked in the,
In Gujarat, the entire process is on the net. You don't have to have any human interface to get any of your building approvals. Ahmedabad, in the last 10 years, the prices of real estate have been largely stable except for inflation indexing. There's no profiteering. The real estate developers don't make huge profit, make normal profits. And, one of these large jewelers, Kalyan Jewelers, I think, I met him the other day. The old man was talking good things, but the young man came into the room, his son, excited like anything before the elections, only to convey to me that I've set up retail stores all across the country. Gujarat is the only place I never had to go even once. My office would just feed in data onto the net. We got all our approvals on due date on the net. I've not paid 1 rupee bribe, and I haven't had any delay in the opening date. I started all stores on the due date. So we are trying to bring that on a national level, and I hope we shall succeed.
Well, I had so many questions for each one of you, but I'm told we are already running out of time.
May I finish that bureaucracy question briefly?
If I may supplement my question, and then you can answer it. I would like a situation where, as a private sector manager or as a bureaucrat, you should not have to know the rules. You follow the conscience, do the right thing, and no harm will come to you. And should something happen, it should be the executive which will stand up for you. You should not be asked to go to the court. I know that this cannot be legislated. It cannot be done by hukum. It happens only by exemplary behavior. But I think this, in my opinion, is what we have had missing, and it is a fear of irrational which is paralyzing our country. And now over to you, and then we will have audience questions.
Very briefly, it's not about the bureaucracy or the private sector. It's not about the ownership being public or private. I've always believed that we've had enough failures in the private sector, so we can't really say that it's just because a company is in the public sector it fails. Not that I'm defending all of what happens in the public sector, but historically, if you go to see the kind of constrained atmosphere in which a public sector employee works is really very difficult to allow entrepreneurship to flourish. So if Shivakumar takes a decision or Marten takes a decision, he'll rationally take a quick decision, look at all mitigating circumstances, and arrive at a decision and implement it. But if NTPC or Coal India has to take a decision, they have to look at the policing at their backside. They have to be concerned about being to the letter and spirit of the law in every respect, in every T, comma, full stop. I met a very senior regulator a couple of days ago who gave me instances where now quasi-judicial decisions made by government officials, when they sit in quasi-judicial functions, decisions made by regulators such as SEBI and RBI, and on one decision where there was a possibility to pass a maximum penalty of 17,000 crores. But in his wisdom, the regulator felt that would kill the whole industry, forget that company. He passed a smaller penalty. He has the CVC and the CBI hounding that person, that bureaucrat after his retirement, that regulator. Now, in such a situation, I would actually compliment the bureaucracy. And certainly large parts of the bureaucracy, even today, do their job honestly, with high levels of probity and integrity. They are certainly black sheep, but we have no less in the private sector. And you had to face some problems in your company too. Sure. So I think the bigger picture is they are working in a very constrained atmosphere. I would in fact compliment them, I would in fact encourage them, and I would try to empower them. And when I made an effort to get the private sector to come and work at the kind of salaries that they are working in, I tried to open up Coal India Limited's position for chairman and managing director. I went to the people, I approached people through forums such as this. Please apply for that position. It may not pay you big bucks, but the amount of satisfaction that could have given a person would be more than I would get at the end of my 5-year tenure. If we could have made Coal India the world's most valuable mineral company. And hardly anybody applied, 1 or 2 applied who didn't come out to be eligible.
But that day
and it pains me.
But that day will come.
No, but it pains me that where is that national spirit? Where is that spirit of service? And sitting with crores of rupees salaries, we in the private sector are berating those people who in the banks, who in the public sector companies, IAS officials who could have otherwise had brilliant and flourishing careers, are working for 1 lakh rupees a month and still doing their job quite honorably. I think we should stand up for them, we should encourage them.
Thank you. Stirring comment. And invite questions from the audience. The gentleman with the Panama hat. You have been selected only because of your hat.
Thank you, sir. I wore it only for that reason. Okay. Minister Harry Dole from IBBI. Loved what you said. Our hearts, our souls are with you. But I have some couple of issues which I want to ask you, as if you could take it as a comment, to work with you on these issues. The international and the national investor wants to understand who's in charge of this country. Is it the sovereign? Because I believe in God and then I believe in my Sarkar as the sovereign, my Baap. Or is it some other forum which is going to come and say, with due respects to that forum, that decisions taken for the last 20 years, 30 years are wrong. The process was wrong, therefore everybody else dies. Now I'm not very clear on this because this takes me back to the telecom sector. We've had a similar experience. We've had the tax sector. We went into retrospective and all of that. I don't want to sound cynical, but I'm just trying to figure out what is the assurance we can give our investors, whether they're Indian or foreign. The same thing won't happen again after 10 years. Because I think the problem lies not in all of the things that have been said today. The problem lies in the simple fact that there are 2 things missing. One is that we at our DNA level have still not understood to respect private capital. And we have also not understood and respect the fact that you have to grandfather these guys. Once the state wants to withdraw from a certain area, you have to grandfather these people. And if you don't grandfather them, it will be over. So how are we going to get these investments?
So can I get
tell you what the Honorable Finance Minister said, and I think it's the first time in the history of India that a senior government functionary has had the ability to say that there is nothing wrong in being pro-business and being pro-poor. And that's the philosophy that this government believes in. We believe economic growth is the way to take the poor people's agenda forward. The Honorable Finance Minister also made a categorical assurance to all investors, all stakeholders, that this government will not do a witch hunt, this government will not make retroactive amendments to law or policy, and we have stood by that. We have not made any amendment which goes back into history. On the contrary, we are making every effort to empower the bureaucracy, empower the people who have to take decisions in even closing litigation, which over the years has been the bugbear of India. And we are making an effort to put an end to litigation wherever we feel the case is not good enough to withstand further scrutiny.
But the questions, Rahul, but the question has to be brief.
Very quickly, in terms of any organization.
Rahul, you may like to just introduce yourself very quickly.
I'm Rahul Bhasin, I work with Bearings Private Equity Partners. Just very quickly, I think in any organization, if anyone has power without responsibility or power without an outcome or a deliverable, there is always corruption, no matter how small. The way the government is structured, it's very unclear as to what deliverables are at any part of the government, whether it's at the ministry level, bureaucracy level, any place. And the second part of which is complementary to this observation, is that people don't do what intent is. People never follow what policy statements are, intents are. People follow rewards and punishments, which means it's about incentives, and all organizations work exactly the same way, including the government. Is there any intent to, one, align specific responsibility concomitant with authority, and two, create rewards and incentives in the government?
Very clearly, we as politicians are on an incentive structure, because every 5 years we have to go back to the people for a fresh mandate. So we have responsibility to the people of India. We are being judged for the outcomes we deliver every 5 years, and in India now every few months, with elections happening in different parts of the country. So I would think that politicians are accountable to the people. They have to deliver. In terms of the bureaucracy over the years, we certainly have created a situation where merit has been compromised. There's time-bound promotions. There's promotion based on scales. We are in a fix in terms of being able to incentivize the merit performers, except through better transfers or postings, or maybe a little leeway in the kind of job profile he will hold. I value that suggestion. We will have to develop over the next few months or years a more robust incentivizing and punishment structure.
Our panel has run out of time, but I will squeeze one question from the next panel. So that will be the last question, please. Yeah. And you may like to please introduce yourself.
Yeah, Sarjeet today, yeah. Mr. Goyal, since morning, industry people are reflecting the trust deficit between government and industry, and between the bureaucracy and the industry, because of lingering on the previous government. So how this government is going to build up confidence between the industry and the government and the bureaucracy and government, because the Prime Minister wants 25% growth rate. So how are you going to take this decision?
What growth rate?
25%, Vivek.
Wow. That would be great if India can have the capacity to grow at 25%. I believe India has the ability, but we don't have the capacity. Or we have the demand, but we don't have the capacity. But I would love to see that day in my lifetime. Sir, as regards the trust deficit, Mr. Narendra Modi, as Prime Minister and earlier as the Chief Minister, has earned the trust of the people by his actions. B, in the last 6 months, with all sincerity in different actions that we have taken, we have reflected the mood of the people, and we've tried to deliver on the promises we've made. C, I'll just give you an example to tell you why I believe people trust this government and the leadership of this government. When the solar industry was sitting pretty with an anti-dumping duty in their favor from the Commerce Ministry, only to be notified by the Finance Ministry on 21st August. And it would have been very difficult, mind you, for Indian government not to have imposed that duty, particularly when we were talking of Make in India as being our hallmark. We had to protect the domestic industry. Only on the back of a 6-hour dialogue with the petitioners on anti-dumping, we were able to demonstrate our sincerity. We were able to earn their trust enough for them to withdraw suo moto their request for anti-dumping on the solar panels being imported, recognizing that if India has to achieve a 5x growth even from the then solar mission and do 100 gigs of solar energy in this country in the next 7 years, It will be important for imports and domestic industry to coexist. And the very fact that without a shred of paper, signed or promises given on paper, the industry trusted this government, withdrew their anti-dumping request, and we are now working to deliver on our assurances. I can assure you the people of India, investors, manufacturers, and by and large, the entire ecosystem is in a mood to trust the government, in a mood to grow along with the government, go along with the efforts of the government, and there may be cynics here and there, but by and large, I am finding tremendous cooperation from all stakeholders, from all sides of the fence.
Well, I now have to wrap up.
Sorry, one last question to Mr. Goyal. Since given its popularity, on social media, our Twitter handle is really, it's buzzing with questions for you. But one particular question which seems to be repeated, and if we could pose that question to you for all our Twitter followers, would be, can we ask Mr. Piyush Goyal on the framework with which NDA government would achieve 100% power in India by 2019?
Well, I can certainly assure you why I believe that is possible. It'll take me a couple of minutes, madam. The question is a big one. It's 1 billion people getting power 24/7. Basically, the industry has 3 critical elements. It needs fuel for production. We are addressing the coal problem through an e-auction to the private sector and doubling the production in Coal India so that India can stop importing coal. Stranded and stressed assets can get back on stream, and all national assets created will get adequate fuel is our motto. There are gas-based plants which in all these years have been set up but have not seen an ounce of gas. We are trying to find a framework to use them as a spinning reserve and create a situation where the peaking demand is met through the gas-based power plants. Simultaneously, we are looking at generating larger amounts of renewable energy through solar, through wind, through hydel. We are sorting out some of the mess. I'm happy to tell friends here, Teesta, which is a project of strategic importance in Sikkim, for 1,200 megawatts of hydropower, which was stranded for quite a long time, got resolved in 1.5 meetings. A meeting on a Thursday evening last week and spilled over for a couple of hours on Friday. And we've reignited and started that project. Very soon it will get into finishing, and 91% complete project was stalled. So we are trying to ensure that the generating capacity, which most of it is already there, only needs fuel, to double the production or the output of electricity. Simultaneously, $50 billion investment plans on transmission and distribution, for which $10 billion will come out of government support. A little more than 10 billion actually, which will help the states which are starved for funds, strengthen the sub-transmission and distribution network right up to the last mile. We are looking at certain off-grid and microgrid solutions for the interiors of India. And lastly, we are looking at major amendments to the policy framework, both in tariff policy and the Electricity Act. We are also creating a new renewable energy policy, all of which will provide a more robust framework, implementation of renewable energy obligations, which will allow the last mile delivery, the supply, to get more competition, and maybe like the mobile phones, we'll have the ability to be able to choose our supplier at our homes, in our industry. We are creating the framework for that. We are taking the stakeholders, including the states, along with us. I'm very confident come 2019, just like Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh have 24/7 power for all, more than adequate power for farmers, the whole of the country, the whole of India will be satisfied, will get the benefits of 24/7 power.
If there are no more questions that I can take for the very popular minister, I have to thank and apologize. I wish next time you will have at least another half an hour. I'm sure I would have liked to probe Krish and Marten and Adil and Shiv a lot more, but we have to cut it short here. And the takeaway I get from a lot of information is that the more mismanaged and undermanaged a situation, that is what champions like, because that is where you can move the needle the maximum. And more than once the minister made the remark that, he welcomed the judgment because he saw it as an opportunity. And that theme was recurring in many other, also his remark that just the fact that there is no electricity for all practical purposes in eastern India, what better, cleaner slate could you have? So we wish you good luck, and on behalf of all 1.25 billion Indians, we wish you succeed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, all the panelists. Sirs, I would expect you to just stay on stage for a minute more, and I'm going to call upon stage now our managing editor at ET Now, Sridharan Ramakrishnan, to just present you with a memento. I am already getting mine. You think I'm going to walk out from here without getting? Okay, thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.